Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Javier from Wärtsilä. I work across the NEM and the broader Australian market. And in my role as a market development manager, I interface between two different worlds. One is that of the modeling, and the other one is that of the business decision-making. And quite often, these two worlds, unfortunately, they don't always talk to each other very well. So today I'll be sharing you a fairly simple case study of how we used Plexos in the context of comparing gas firming technology options in the NEM and how we were able to utilize Plexos in answering quite a specific business problem that utilities and potential developers in Australia are now facing. So just a short company introduction in case you're not familiar. So Wärtsilä is a global leader in the marine and energy industry, providing, let's say, decarbonization technology solutions and services. We're a company of about 20,000 employees, and we're a publicly listed company in Finland. And then, as you can see from the bottom of the slide, we've delivered energy solutions to more than 180 countries and territories around the world. And we've been in Australia for more than 3 decades. So what do we actually do in the energy space? So we have 3 different solutions in our portfolio. And they come together quite nicely with some of the gentailers we are working with in this market. So for example, AGL Energy is one of those customers that's using all of our solutions in our portfolio. So first of all, we have Wärtsilä reciprocating engines that are really ideal for gas firming type of applications. Then we have a battery energy storage system solution. So we are one of the major system integrators here in this market in particular. And last but not least, we are also a life cycle service provider in this, for these 2 segments. So as you can see, we play the other side. So a lot of the energy transition obviously being a lot about solar and wind. We as a company focus more on the flexibility part that you need to complement that renewable energy. And of course, South Australia being one of those NEM regions where the renewable energy penetration is the highest, so about 74% of energy coming from renewable energy. There are those very wind and sunny days where all of your 100% or even more of your generation is coming from renewables, and then you have other days, multiple consecutive days, where you have to rely on some firming and backup solutions. So moving on to the Plexos part. So we've been using Plexos for more than 15 years. As you can see, we've done more than 200 Plexos studies across the world. We do quite different types of use cases for Plexos, from long-term expansion modeling to modeling specific portfolios of utilities. And I would say quite often, or most commonly, the use case that we talk about is that you have 2 pathways as a utility. You can either maintain the status quo of your baseload thermal assets, or you can embrace a highly renewable energy type of system where you also need flexibility to back up that system. We have a Plexos team that sits in Helsinki, Finland, and they then support us here in different market areas. So quite often we use Plexos to engage with the market, to have structured discussions on where the market is going and how we can show the value of that high renewable system with flexibility. And the case study I wanted to present today is about price to dispatch, backcasting of gas firming technologies in different NEM regions. Why I think this case study is interesting for the audience today is that it's we took a fairly, let's say, business-driven question and applied Plexos to that. And I think this particular case also quite nicely demonstrates how those two worlds of the modeling have to make sense for the business decision makers as well. So a little bit about the background, why we wanted to do gas firming modeling in the first place. So I think it was quite nicely covered in some of the earlier sessions today that you still need gas firming as a backup solution to cover those Dunkelflaute or consecutive days of low renewable energy output. And essentially, if you are a utility, as all of you would probably in this room know, there's a lot of price volatility in the wholesale markets, and that's only going to increase. So that's one additional reason to consider how are you going to protect yourself from this increasing risk in the market. The second one is the technical lifetime of coal assets reaching their end. So I think the average fleet of the coal age of the coal fleet in Australia is about 39 years. So that's starting to come closer. And there is a technical but also economical limitations that does it actually make sense to wait until that technical lifetime limit comes there. So if you're a utility and you have 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 megawatt coal station and you're going to close that down, it's as if someone would have taken a big bite out of your whole generation portfolio. So you need to be able to replace that so that your portfolio is still providing the lowest cost for you and that you're able to cover those instances of renewable variation. And the last reason why to look at gas is, of course, the lack of firm and dispatchable capacity. So obviously the market is now very focused on renewables and batteries. So yes, batteries are dispatchable, but it's also about that firming capacity, as I've been already mentioning quite a few times, that it's not just enough to have a 4-hour battery, but you actually need to cover for longer durations, multiple consecutive days of low renewable energy output. So introducing the technology candidates for the Plexos modeling that we did. Quite often AMO, ISP, and some of the market stakeholders talk about gas peaking, gas firming, and quite often we hear gas turbines, but it's actually a little bit more nuanced than that. There are actually quite a few options available in this space. So we consider 3 candidate technologies. One is the reciprocating engines that we manufacture. So those are 200 to 300 ton machines. So they're very big, 10 to 25 megawatt unit sizes, and you would have, let's say, 5 to 10 to 20 units of them comprising a bigger power station. Then you have the gas turbine options. So you have aeroderivative gas turbines, which have been adopted from the aviation industry. And then lastly, you have your heavy-duty industrial large-frame gas turbines, which have a great power density and can deliver a lot of power with fewer number of units. A lot of the utilities, they consider that, okay, I'm probably going to need some gas firming. And on a surface level, the different technologies might have similar investment costs, similar utilization rate, similar OPEXs, maybe with the difference that the heavy-duty gas turbine has really the lowest, a bit lower investment cost compared to the first 2 options. But if you look at it on a little bit more granular level, you actually start seeing quite a bit of differences. And by the way, this is all simple cycle, so not considering the kind of combined cycle baseload type of solutions where you add a steam cycle on top of the generating unit. So these gas firming options are really to cover those intermittencies in the renewable energy space. So essentially what you need to know about these different gas firming options is that there's 2 main differences. The first one is about operational flexibility. So as you can see, the startup time from 0% output to 100% output for reciprocating engines and aeroderivative gas turbines is 2 to 5 minutes. So in 2 to 5 minutes, it can go from 0 to providing 100% of output. So that's one important parameter that you're going to need in a good gas firming assets that's supporting a renewable-led power system. The other dimension where these technologies differ is related to the efficiency. So you can see that reciprocating engines have 46 to 49%, this is lower heating value efficiency, 0% tolerance. And that's considerably lower than what you would have for gas turbines. So for gas turbines, you typically have about 38 to 39% efficiency. But then when you operate them on a part load in practice, during that ramping up and ramping down phase, you see lower efficiencies and fuel consumption. So those are the two different big areas where they differ. So talking a little bit about the Plexos modeling itself. So as mentioned, we do engage every week with utility or a potential developer in Australia. And essentially what we wanted to show with this Plexos modeling exercise was that how the industry should also expand a little bit from the view of how they evaluate these different technologies. Because as I said, on a surface level, they might look very similar, but in practice, there's quite a bit of differences. So quite frequently, we would have developers looking at a 25-year economic lifetime for different assets, and they would kind of consider the capex and opex considerations across that time frame. What we wanted to showcase was that if you actually start considering these small nuances on the technical constraints, fuel efficiencies, and those part load curves, you start to have actually different outcomes in the dispatch side. So we wanted to essentially find out how much revenue or operating profit these three different technologies could generate, and what kind of utilization levels could you see coming from them. So as for the inputs, we used 5 years of historical price data, 5-minute resolution. We used daily gas prices for the 5 years time period. We used hourly temperatures for the 5-year period as well. We applied different technical parameters, technical constraints, performance curves, as well as maintenance-related cost into the consideration. And we did 2 types of scenarios. So first type of scenario was kind of a traditional type of power system where you can easily predict the demand the next day and the price the next day. So that was represented by the 24-hour look ahead. So you know what's going to happen 24 hours ahead in terms of the pricing. And another one was a 15-minute look ahead, which represents a more kind of unpredictable renewable-led power system where solar or wind can suddenly shut down or become unavailable, or a generator can come offline instantly. And for both backcasting methods, we assumed price taker conditions and no restriction to sales volume. So this was a kind of an artificial construct that we just wanted to see how the technologies would compare across these 2 scenarios. So looking at the results, so the first part is how did the utilization for these 3 gas firming technologies look like? So they all had roughly 20 to 40% capacity factors on an average year. So obviously there was differences on annual level, but on average 20 to 40% capacity factor in the last 5 financial years that we looked at. What was really interesting was the results for the heavy-duty gas turbine. And you can see, depending on whether we looked at the kind of traditional type of 24-hour look ahead and the 15-minute look ahead, the utilization of that asset dropped by 90%. And that's a lot. And what this tells us, that at least in the context where you have a lot of, let's say, price volatility, and you need to be able to react rapidly to changes in renewable energy output, the more flexible units that you have, the better investment security is as well. And then about turning this into the top line dollar values. So luckily, the operating profits between the two different scenarios for the heavy duty didn't drop as much as in the utilization side. So I was still able to cover those higher price intervals. But you can see that there's quite a bit of a spread depending on what you consider here to be the kind of closest to the actual market outcomes. But what we can conclude, at least for the price volatile renewable-led type of systems, is that there's a large underperformance risk due to this low flexibility of this particular technology type. For the aeros, it provides a fairly decent hedge at a lower utilization. And for the reciprocating engines, that provided the broadest hedge due to the lowest, not just kind of the operational flexibility, but also the lowest marginal cost. And maybe just to use a very practical analogy from everyday life. So if you're shopping for a travel insurance, there's a lot of cheap options out there, but they only cover you for a very specific outcome or an event. If you are a utility or a developer, you also want to consider that how do you mitigate your risk? How much does your insurance product cover of all the risks that are out there? So that's one very practical example. So what did we learn from this modeling exercise? So first of all, we learned that the levelized cost type of analysis is not enough. So it is beneficial to understand a little bit the revenue side of these flexible gas firming assets. Second, the operating assumptions matter quite a bit. So maybe don't just take the average site conditions, but really look at those extremes and what happens there. So just one example is that, for example, the ambient conditions, what happens if it's an extreme weather year? What happens if you start adding some technical constraints? Because that's really going to impact your dispatch outcomes. And the third modeling insight here was that the technology choice matters. Even on a surface level, the use case for these technologies is fairly similar. The value creation logic, and to the extent that these different assets protect you from the risk that is out there in the market, can actually differ quite a lot. So it's really useful to consider those nuances as well. So what can the Plexos community and their business partners learn from this case study? And I'll finish off with this one. So I think as we demonstrated in this case, you can also use Plexos for quite simple business problems as well. And I think that's one of the major key takeaways for everyone, that you start with a real business question, and then you apply the modeling to that. The second part is about collaborating on the modeling side. So the modeling team together with the business users to see how does the modeling work, how could it be constructed, what kind of inputs we put there, are they realistic? And then you move on to, and this is really important, translating the results into business value. So quite often, it's helpful to put a top line value like $100 million or things like that, because that makes it much more concrete for decision makers. And last but not least, it's really important to be transparent about the modeling limitations as well and the assumptions that were used, because that will then lend credibility to your analysis. And you will also understand the limitations of better, that in what kind of circumstance does it work, and in what kind of circumstance does it not work. So with that being said, if you consider all these 4 building blocks, your Plexos work is not just one additional analysis that gets done. You're actually trying to use Plexos to solve a meaningful business problem. Thank you.
Questions?
Hi, just have a question. Like with all of the electricity modeling, the answer is a gas, but do you use Plexos to look at the gas solution as well? In terms of how you contract the gas, the pipeline capacity to supply the GPG?
Sorry, was your question about if we use Plexos to model the gas constraints in the market?
Yeah.
Not in this case. I don't think we have done that, but I might be wrong. We've done quite a few models all over the world, but at least in this case, we didn't do that. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Thanks. Did you look at like different periods of look ahead? So 15 minutes seems very harsh. Did you look at a few hours? We think of similar kind of questions when we're doing battery modeling and I guess, yeah, understanding like how the look ahead kind of properties for batteries is a similar type of question, I think. But yeah, 15 minutes just seemed very, very severe to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to take almost like two extremes. The reality is probably going to lie somewhere in between that. And probably it might vary from year to year as well and week to week as well. But I think you had like a very good point. So it's not one or the other, but it's probably like you're in actual operating conditions, you're probably somewhere in between. And you had another good point that you mentioned about the batteries. So we as a technology company, we have both in our portfolio. We have the short-term flexibility and we have the longer-term flexibility with our gas engines. So the way we see it, at least in the NEM, what we have observed in the market, a lot of the batteries, 90% of the time, they operate on that evening peak only. While, for example, in the case of the Barker Inlet power station, it's not just operating the evening peak, as quite often, there would be some comments that, okay, gas, we just need it some evenings, but it's actually operating around that. So probably half of the time or majority of the time it's still operating in the evening, but it's also doing quite a bit of heavy duty work around the nighttime when the renewable output goes down, and sometimes in the morning as well. So I think it's really important that we need both types of flexibility, both short-term but also long-term. So we should really probably move away from considering gas peaking that you only need it one day a year or 2 weeks a year. It depends a lot on the type of gas technology that you need in that particular instance.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I was just wondering, taking the model further, revenue, moving away from like having a fixed price that you estimate, are you looking at maybe doing some kind of price cap or price floor, various contracts? Can you see using Plexos to incorporate those kind of inputs into your model? Do you need further explanation?
No, I think it was a fairly, straightforward question. So it really depends on the case. So sometimes we might go quite detailed in some of the modeling work that we do. So it really depends market to market that what are kind of the key elements to consider there. So for example, we can also do, if there's multiple energy markets and multiple types of capacity markets, we can also consider those types of revenue streams and apply different kind of constraints. So I think it's in a way, the possibilities are endless. And in some case, we do quite a bit of extensive modeling that can take half a year or even a year. But I think it's really about defining the business problem and not overcomplicating things if you don't need to. And in some cases, we've modeled the entire continental European system on a like pretty much country level and node level. So we do very complex and we do very simple stuff.